Greetings, I am Darkling and this is Ark Survival Evolved. Today I'm going to cover a few things relating to dual snap points, why people have problems with them, how to stretch a snap point, and how to use the dual snap points to create battlements and custom shaped windows. Now they're all pretty straightforward, but we're going to cover them anyway just in case you've missed them, and hopefully if you stick around you may learn something. So one of the problems I see popping up on the forums quite a lot is people complaining about the dual snap point from a ceiling. Now that's what I call it. I don't know what anyone else calls it, but I'm going to show you what it is. Now first thing I'm going to do is build a starter box, just like everybody usually does when they first start playing Ark. They'll build a little bit of a box and then they'll consider expanding from it. So here is our box, which everything looks very pretty, everything's all lined up just the way it should be. Okay, so now I'm going to drop another ramp off this side and I'm going to extend on top. Now I'm going to extend and build as I see people build. I'm just going to place everything without actually paying attention to what snap point it's snapping to. Now I've seen new players do this and I've seen seasoned players do this. So it does cover a broad range of people's problems. Now you'll notice that the roofs or the ceilings are snapping in much different places. We've got holes in the walls. Now if I actually correct this ceiling here and line it up with the rest of the ceilings, then remove these ones out of here, as you would if you were expanding your base, you'll note that there's holes everywhere. Now what it is when I went through and quickly snapped everything, half of these snapped to the ceiling and half of them snapped to the wall. Now ideally when you are doing a build, you want to make sure that you are snapping it to the wall below, not the ceiling. Now this is actually a real easy thing to fix, or at least not have occur. Basically what you do is remove the ceiling. If the ceiling isn't there, then you're literally just snapping wall to wall. So while you're rebuilding an area, just remove that ceiling out of there and you won't have a problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a pronounced version of how this happens. So ideally you're building your base, you have 3 walls up one side, for example. Okay, so there's your 3 walls, and on the other side maybe you added a level in here, maybe you added a level over here, and there we go. So say we added a few levels in. This is obviously a silly example because you know we can. Now what we do is we connect across the top, and lo and behold we now have a space of 2 ceilings. See, the way you want to count it is not the walls, it's how many ceiling spaces you've added. So you can see that we've added 2 ceiling spaces there, and that then creates a huge gap, but it is still technically a snapped point. So while it is unsightly, it will still work, but if you don't prevent it, it will cause a lot more headaches when you go to expand your base even further. So when you're adding onto your base and you're building on top of the ceilings and you do have walls, make sure you get that lower snap. One of the methods I use when I'm building is I will have a few placed already. We'll just attach some walls below here, and when I attach the first one, I will go in with the second one and then I will cycle the snaps and see which snap point that I actually got to. Okay, I can now see that I got the lower one on the second one, so I can go through and make sure the others snap correctly. Now it's pretty straightforward. But like I said, if you do have problems, the easiest thing to do is just remove the original ceilings that are there, place the walls, and then put the ceilings back. It's a far easier method to go with, and you'll have a lot less problems. Okay, so I'm going to make a spiral ramp using stretched snap points. Now you can do this in a straight line, you can do it in a circle. Well, I call this a circle, it's not really much of a circle. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stretch out the first few snap points. Now that's one stretch, that's a second stretch. We're going to take it across the top. Bring it down. Now, for those of you that are new to building an arc, you'll note that you can't actually snap to that bottom wall. You'll have to actually add the extra wall in to create the snap point, which isn't too much of a hassle, especially when you're building with scaffolding. I do encourage people to use scaffolding in their building. You can actually open up a lot more snap possibilities if you do. Okay, so there you go, we've got our first snap stretch right there. So I'm going to keep doing that all the way around, and you're going to stick with me because everybody seems to ask me to do this whole process. When they've asked for tutorials, they want to see not just how I put things together, but they want to see the mistakes as well. And believe me, I make plenty of them. Now, I may have 5,500 hours in Ark, but you still make silly little mistakes, and quite a lot of the time they are silly mistakes. Now, when you're building like I do, in the large scale, you are going to also go through a lot of parts. You're going to make some snaps in funny places, you're going to demo the wrong spots. Get over it. If you make a mistake, if you use a few extra tiles because you've screwed up and demoed the wrong section, don't worry about it. As soon as you start stressing over that, you're going to make your whole build that much more stressful, and you really don't need to do that. Just carry on working and everything will be alright. When I actually calculate how much building materials I'm going to need for a build, I tend to actually double, potentially triple it, and then I still don't have enough. It's funny when you start to build in the large scale, you sort of lose track of what is a reasonable amount of materials. I tend to build in the hundreds just to, because I don't like having to stop and start. I prefer just getting a build done in one go, which is one of the reasons this doing these tutorials is great, is because I have a good excuse to spawn everything in. And that is another thing that I do encourage people to do. Hop on your single player, spawn stuff in. The spawn codes for S Plus are on the S Plus forums. You can get hold of them very easily, and I do encourage you to hop onto your single player, spawn in everything that you can, and play with it. See what you can do. Come up with some ideas. Try snap points out. You'll be amazed what you can and can't do. And if you don't try it, you never will. Because a lot of people won't try like any kind of building techniques when they think they're going to lose the parts. Again, I don't get it. I mean, I go through so many parts, like just wasted bits. I'm sort of over the whole experience. I don't really care anymore. But there's still a lot of people out there that get frustrated when they have to make extra of something. You'll get past it. Okay, and if you do it in single player, you can really have a go at making something that you wouldn't normally have a go with. Whenever I start on a new big build, I will usually hop on a single player instance of the map, and like the map that I'm intending to build on, and I will go to the section that I'm looking at and see if I can actually fit it in. I like to get just a basic idea before I go into doing a server build to make sure I've got the space I need to work with. This is just advanced planning, and it makes it a lot easier. My builds are so massive that it tends to be a problem finding a good area to get a foothold. For those of you that actually have followed me for a while through Mazion's tour videos and whatnot, you'll actually recognize the area that I'm working in currently. I picked it because I know the area quite well. This was the spot that I did my center map build. Can't really see because it's very foggy at the moment, but this is the big bay on the South Tropic, and I had a bridge going over the entrance. There was a huge base here. You'd never believe that it would actually fit in this location, but it definitely did. I think it was 45 walls high in the end of it, and I couldn't tell you how many wide it was. Because it was built in the hex, it is a little bit more difficult to, or how many rounds it is rather than how many across. I do find that's a common thread when you're building with Ark though, is things that look like they're only little small things, like areas, gaps you want to fence off or whatnot, you'll find that they're a lot bigger than they might look. I was helping a friend wall off a section of underwater cave at one point, and we thought, oh, you know, we'll just need 20-30 XL walls, and I think we ended up using a few hundred. It's amazing how things get run away on you. Okay, so I'm going to turn off the fly and let's have a run up the stairs, ramp or whatever you want to call it. As you can see, the gaps are quite pronounced still, very nicely spaced out, and you can still run underneath it. This will make a great way of adding a little bit of a nice feature to a build. You can also use this in a straight line to create a gradient ramp, which is what I do actually want to do. If you want to change the height of some foundations, maybe you want to raise a foundation up, you can also use this technique. You can go upwards with it, you cannot go downwards with it. This technique will not work in reverse. It's a bit of a pain. It would be nice if it did, but yeah, you're just going to have to live with it, I'm afraid. So that is stretching a snap point to create a spiral ramp. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to make use of a dual snap point on the ceiling. Now, I really like this particular technique. I use it quite a bit on my builds because I think it has a very good look. I quite like castles, so I use the dual snap point to create a battlement. It's actually a very straightforward process. I'll show you two ways of doing this. One is a lot easier. I'm not going to make this very tall because I don't really need to. Okay, it's too many. Now, the easiest way to do this is go straight across the top like it is right now with the railings. I'm not going to because there's something I want to occur. I hope it will occur so that I can show you a technique that should speed up your building. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this more difficult on myself, and I'm going to put the walls in place. Now, when you're building, especially if you've got a lot of snap points in an area, you'll find that things jump around a lot. And hopefully this will occur properly. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep my cursor dead still. Actually snap to the correct snap point. So the get it here. Okay, so this is what I was looking for. As you'll note, every time I try and snap it to the snap point that I want it to snap to, it's dropping to the lower snap point. So what we're going to do is we're going to play opposites. Now, I haven't moved my cursor here. Now, this is a very important matter. When you're doing this, don't move your cursor because it will reset what you're looking at. So I've made sure my cursor is placed where I can pick up the tile if it doesn't place properly. And what I'm going to do is, instead of trying to snap it to that top snap point, I'm going to snap it exactly where it keeps snapping. And lo and behold, it'll snap to the correct spot. Now, I call this snapping opposites. I tend to find it happens a lot. and if you can predict it. Now I say predict it. If you're doing an expensive build and you have this pop up a lot, you can actually save yourself a lot of time. Okay, so we're having it happen again here. Keep pressing the wrong keys, so we're getting all sorts of things popping up. So I can predict that it's going to happen again, so I'm going to place it on the bottom. Okay, again we're getting it pop up. Now I've moved my cursor so it's not necessarily going to work here. So I'm going to drop it to the lower one, and sure enough I've moved my cursor too much and it's not actually going to occur. It all depends where you're standing, but I know a lot of people have problems with some of the snaps and they get rather frustrated. I'm going to have it here. Oh, I've moved my cursor, but it still worked. So that's snapping to an opposite. I don't know quite what's going on or why it's occurring, but a lot of people seem to have a lot of problems with it. Now what we're going to do is thus go through and add the door frames. Now these should actually snap very straightforward into place. If you're on the other side it'll be a little bit finicky, but if you're on this side facing the actual outside of it, it goes on really nicely. So then all we have to do is go through and change all these to, come on, change all these to half walls. Would be nice having a gun for this, like with some of the other things, but S Plus has made things so much easier for us as it is. I don't think we need it too much easier. And there we go. We have ourselves a battlement structure, and as you can see, when it goes around the curve, it looks gorgeous. Now you can snap it the other way around, where you snap the railing to the wall below and the door frame to the ceiling above. However, in doing so, you end up with quite funky looking battlements. I find they look too tall, whereas if you snap it this way around, they do tend to look quite nice. So that is how you create yourself a basic battlement. So like making the battlement, you can also use the dual snap point in other ways. Now I'm going to use fly for this part, just to make it a little bit easier on myself. Now I'm going to build this outwards a little bit, just to offer a slightly easier snapping. Now this will be a problematic snap. There are a lot of snapping techniques that are quite simple. This one, as simple as it is also rather problematic. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to snap to the ceiling. Now I'm then going to add the wall below. I had to make sure that was snapping to the ceiling, not to the sloped wall, because it did, I don't know if you noticed, it did try to snap to that. Now this is where you're going to go through a lot of materials, because what we want is hopefully, yep, there it goes, we wanted to snap to that wall below. That allowed us to overlay the two sloped walls. Now this does tend to be a problematic snap, because they tend to jump around a lot. Okay. This one really doesn't like me. And you'll see there's actually multiple snaps up there. I have to pick the correct one. I don't want that one. Shortly we'll go through a lot of materials doing this, no doubt. Still doesn't get it. Okay, so we did have the wrong one. Let's say I need to move that. And there we go. We actually got it without too much hassle. I've actually made these before where I've used handfuls of materials. So there you go, you can make this a little bit taller. Obviously the one over there has an extra wall space in it, so it gives you a little bit of elongation. This one here is literally just a diamond, but the overlapping of the sloped walls can allow for some creative use of windows and door frames and whatnot. I quite like the overlapping techniques, but like I said, you're going to go through materials. The amount of materials I've used on some of these, when I built this one over here, the top snaps, I had so many problems with them. I must have gone through at least 10 of each slope wall just to get it right. So if you are going to try these slightly more complex snaps, you're going to go through materials, and you just have to not stress about it because you are going to lose them. So hopefully this will allow you to come up with some slightly more interesting shapes in your builds, and I really hope to see some new things popping up. If you do use any of these techniques, drop me a line, send me a screenshot. I'd love to see what you've come up with.